So Todd and I are kind of working together on this, but I'm actually controlling the PowerPoint. I'm in Sydney, Todd's in Melbourne, so there's a little bit of logistics here, but going to answer some sort of basic questions up front. So this is a 101. This isn't intended to be necessarily for people that have had any experience with them whatsoever. So the first point is this: what are variations? So if you haven't used them before, they are a tool which changes or can change the cross-section of a template applied to a string. And generally what you're doing is you're changing a code or a section, let's put it that way, on any part of your template. And we're going to raise this up front. Todd and I were talking about this. Do not use variations to try and control the center line or the BAT or BAT or BATA codes on your template. I think it's a fair summary, Todd.
Yep. Yeah, very much so. There's special codes that are not controlled by the variation controls at all.
No. We will mention in, I guess, the design data form will flag where you can do the BATA, and the centerline is the vertical grading editor at the end of the day. So that's where you control those particular codes. So we'll be looking at everything other than those two. Now, really, the question is, when should you use design variations? And look, there is no, I guess, Todd, there's no kind of right or wrong way of answering this. There is a very wrong way when we look at point 2 in here, and we have an answer for that. In fact, there's a webinar which I'll mention shortly. Yes. But certainly, look, there is nothing wrong with applying multiple templates, but it's just this element, I suppose, isn't it? The time consumption for creating and applying.
There's multiple ways to achieve the same thing.
Yeah. And look, I suppose one of the big ones is the transitions. Transitions between templates are linear. So when you're transitioning between a template, you're basically going from a point to a point. There's no accounting of any maybe curvature that is going on in between those 2 points or between those 2 chain edges. So changing templates works for some instances, but not for all.
If you want to have finesse on control, then variations is the key.
Absolutely. Yeah, and look, finesse and control is something we're going to talk about here, but certainly if you're wanting to move a code that happens to match onto a feature, so for example, an alignment, you're doing some widening, or you need to make some actual physical changes to really change the shape that are not 90 degrees, where you're not putting a code 90 degrees to the template, then variations are going to suit your requirements. The great thing is also they respect the subgrade. And I know, Todd, this is going to be something you're going to be covering.
Yes, I'll look at that a couple of times in my examples. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And certainly, adding a code into your template, which wasn't there originally, does have implications on subgrade. So we're going to be covering that. And really, variations are perfect. Look, I mean, if you've got one single code along a string and you're going to be making different changes to it along that string, obviously having a template is by far the most time-consuming aspect of making changes to it. So variations are perfect. Even if you're just focusing on the one code, they're really good at helping manage it. Now, the complete polar opposite of this webinar is, as he presses on the PowerPoint, is this webinar. So when should I not use design variations is this webinar. And actually, a lot of the content, I think, in fact, Todd, you're going to be doing copy codes, which actually looks at putting a footpath in at the back of our proposed road or existing road.
Yes.
Eyelet Street. And
yes, where the parking facility is.
That's right, where the parking is. We actually did the parking, which you do not use design variations for. We used a Civil 3D alignment, and people go ahead and try using match to alignment for that. Completely the wrong method. And this webinar is it's the polar opposite, but it'll actually complement. So it shows you the complete opposite reason why you would not use variations and templates and actually use independent strings associating with each other and then using Model Builder to maintain the connection. So well worth having a look. It's on the Civil Site Design YouTube channel under the webinar playlist. And I think I've moved it, so it's actually just after I think it's the second from first one that we've done a year ago.
Really?
And then, yeah, I know. Can you look at the date on that? I can't believe it's a year ago already. We did this one. So yeah, it's time's flying. Then the last point is, well, how do I apply and manage design variations? And certainly for those of us that have been using the software for a long time, and Todd, I mean, you've been using this software.
I don't really want to admit that, but yeah.
All right. Well, you can come out and talk about it. You're in a safe place.
No, I have been using the software for a very long time.
So you're very much familiar with applying and managing variations through the design data form. So much so, we actually thought today we'd give you a bit of a contrast, everyone, by Todd doing his variations through this form, and then I'm going to do the variations through this form. which is actually through what we call the section data form. So, excuse me, there are a couple of ways we can achieve and apply and manage the variations, and it's a case of showing you both ways. Both work and both are perfectly fine to use, but we want to give you a contrast so you can actually see what works for you and what doesn't. You may prefer to stick with the design data form, but once you see this webcast, you might go, oh, actually, I'd like to use a bit more of the right click and the section data form. Look, we're just plugging some points here about why you might use the design data form. And look, as opposed to, or in addition to, the section data form. And really, the key one is this: the design data form contains every single design variation. Okay, there are a few missing, as we'll see shortly. We've got a little table. Comments, which I know, Todd, you're a keen advocate.
I am.
And so am I, but certainly you're a keen advocate. Todd showed me a job yesterday where there was, I don't know, tens and tens of variations in the same string.
Probably about 200.
200 variations. And comments were there to indent and categorize them, which was very helpful.
Yep.
You can apply any design variation through this form, and you've got the option, which you don't have in the section data, to actually export and import. And we'll show you how to use the export and import. It is actually exporting everything in this form, but it's a useful way of us actually showing you different types of variations being applied to one string. So we can go ahead and do something, save it, and then import an alternative version to get the benefit of seeing what the other way around is. The section data form, which you'll see how to access this at the moment. You're probably seeing it through the right click in the cross-section window, provides a view of design variations, templates, and batter overrides, but only at that cross-section that you're looking at. Okay, so this does not give you the complete list, but it does give you a snapshot at that one particular cross-section.
It's filtered too, which is one of the really cool advantages. So
it is.
Yeah, it's not everything. It's only what's relevant to this section.
Absolutely, which is really nice. And you'll see as I scroll through the cross-section window with this form open, it'll actually adapt and change this particular chainage up here for me, which is nice. So I get to see what's going on as I'm scrolling through my cross-sections. Look, there are some benefits to using this from a speed perspective, that when you right-click over a code and decide to apply a variation of some sort over that particular code, a lot of the cells auto-populate, including the code and the chainage, which is handy. New samples, which Todd's going to mention about how to add extra samples, the trick with adding data entry chainages on the design data form. This will actually go and add these for you. So I could punch in any chainage I want. As long as that box is checked, the extra samples will get added, and models can be updated immediately. So traditionally on the design data form, we have to click on update. So few benefits, you'll get to see them in action, as I said, but one of the key ones for me, actually, as I'm beginning to get used to using them, is that yes, you can access both of these tools via what's known as a grip. So when you select Civil Site Design line work in V22 onwards, I think that's right, Todd. Never know the exact number.
One.
No, one of the variants. You can hover over a grip and access things like the design data form. Whoa, easy. And you can also access the section data form, which is this form. So I can actually go in, see what's happening, and then actually apply variations or templates or batter overrides at that cross-section immediately without opening up the VGE, the design data form, or the cross-section window. Although, as you'll see here, you can open up a cross-section window, which is what we're going to try and do to give you context. So very helpful having the grips. Last few slides are really just to show you the list of variations. So we're going to be covering all of these, and Todd is really kind of covering the top wedge as far as copy codes. Then I'll be covering this sort of vary section slope onwards. The reason why we're showing you this is because there is a slight difference between what the section data form can do and what the design data form can do. So the section data, the right click form, does not have these options available. That will change. We are discussing actually putting them in, but the initial instance of creating this technology was that we just kind of add in some key variations that people want, and I think long term, yes, they'll all go in, which will be handy. There is one other thing. When you use the right click, we actually, because it was sort of intended to be sort of the new user territory, we renamed them. So what you may find is that there are differences in names and terminology. So for example, where we've got match code to surface for the section data form, when we right click, we'll actually see that in the design data form, this is set code levels to match surface. So we're actually giving you the alternate names. I would recommend you probably take a screenshot of this so that you get used to it. I think most of them are self-explanatory. And in actual fact, in the section data form, they were intended to be a lot clearer as to what exactly they did. But for those that have used the software for a long time and want to convert or start using some of the right click or section data, then certainly this is where you'll need to just have a look first of all. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Todd. So I'm going to let you share your screen. I'm hoping that you can just simply go share and override.
Okay.
If not, I will stop
Fingers
sharing.
crossed I set that up. So let's see if I can. I'm just moving things out of the way so you don't see the screen back itself. Yes, I'm going to stop and share that one. Okay, so fingers crossed. Can everyone see my Civil 3D?
I can, Todd, yeah.
With our favourite Mollywalk project?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. So, yes, thank you for that fantastic summary. And I can't reiterate that last slide with the table with the name changes, because it sometimes can get a bit messy if you forget the name in one and look at the other. And yeah, anyway, ultimate goal, hopefully, fingers crossed, that we can get the development team to align the names and then there's no problem with it. But that table is the key for the moment. All right. So I going to show you guys the first few basic insert, delete, and then one I actually like a lot, copy codes, which really is more about merging things together. And I must admit, I have manufactured this drawing to allow me to do all of these things in one spot. So hopefully I don't have to chop and change drawings. I'm just going to go to different parts of this model and show you some of the things that I'm going to have a look at. As we mentioned, you can certainly launch the design data form, which is what my focus in terms of interface is going to be, from a heap of different locations. So you can launch it directly from here, from the ribbon, and then select the code you want, the string you want to access information from. You can launch it from within the vertical grading editor. You can launch it from the cross-section window. You can even launch it from the grips, which is actually some of my favorites. So the first one I'm looking at is going to be this. I come in here, I can just simply go straight to grabbing one of the grips. There's the section data, which is the filtered one. So coming from the cross-section view, and the design data form's there. So you can launch these things from lots of different places. You can even launch them from the model viewer itself. So the first thing we're going to look at is this curve return here at the intersection, and actually right-click in here, get a whole heap of different commands, and I can pull up design data form from there as well. So yeah, lots of ways to access it, and there's probably more that I haven't even mentioned, but they're the main ones. Can also launch cross-section views from the grips, so I'm going to use that a lot in this session. So yeah, just to be consistent, that's how I'm going to launch everything. The first variation I want to look at is insert, but before I get to that, I just want to give you a real quick rundown of what some of these buttons are across the bottom that you may or may not be actually familiar with or used to using. Number one, these two here on the left actually are expanding and contracting all of the entries. So as you add information to the different heading groups here, you can expand them. You can click on the pluses to do individuals, but you can use these to just global expand everything. These ones here are all about whichever entry you're looking at, adding new ones, deleting currently selected ones, copying them, reordering them up and down. This one is, to be honest, best way to insert sections when you need them, which if you launch this one, will launch up into your selected sections list and you can start adding extra things in that you might want to use. This one is about showing up cross sections. This one is opening up the VGE. This one is the template editor. And there are a few others that will appear here depending on what action you're doing. And then there'll be one that appears here, if I remember correctly. That's the one to show you the extent, cross-section, beginning and end stuff. But as they happen, I'll launch them up and show you guys what they do. This one here, add extra data entry changes, is probably one of the big mysteries in this form. I will show you how this works in one of my later examples, in one of the deletes. I'm going to use this, but essentially it's a two-step process. Whenever you add an entry in the variations, you have an option to create a section at the beginning and the end changes that you enter. And this is how you actually add them then to the data set. So it's kind of like you got to set it up, hit the button to essentially update it. Import export is to take a snapshot of all of this information, export it out to file, load it back up again. And that's about it for those things. Let's jump into it. So first one is all about insert. So insert is your ability to add a code to your cross-section without actually manipulating the template itself. But it is the same effect as inserting a section inside your template. So the problem I've got here is this curve return, which transitions from Road 1 around into Eyelet Street here, has use the auto entry for me to generate the template across the cross section, which gives me my nice curve and my nature strip and my footpath. But Road 1 has a boundary code in it, whereas Owlette Street doesn't. So the software doesn't transition those codes around for me. So I'm going to use the insert command, add it in, so that I can actually get the thing to transition from one to the other. So what I need to do is go to my variation entry here in the data list. So it's always about which entry you pick as to what these actions do. So first variation, doesn't matter. You click the entry that says variations, click on plus, it gives you your list. You can then select which variation it is you want to enter. As you build up the list of variations, these options at the bottom here become important, because if you don't select these, wherever you've picked in the list, doesn't matter, it will go to the end of the list, or you can force it to the top. If you've picked a certain point where you want it to go, you can either choose to enter it before and after. So pay attention to these things here when you're actually putting them in. It'll control where they go. If you get it wrong, doesn't matter. You can use the up-down arrows here to resort the order. So the one I want to do is insert section. So I select that. Insert section has to nominate a side. So you need to tell it which side you want to work on. So you need to know the shape of your template. So this is a curve return. We're in Australia, so we run counterclockwise. So everything's on the left. So left for this particular one. Insert position. Two options for this. You've got before the code or at the end. So when we refer to a template down here in this little section view here, the batter is a special code. It's added to the end of your template. It's not actually part of your template per se. So when we say end of template, we're actually saying the end of the codes here, which amazingly my cross-section view is not showing the right values. I thought I changed all this. I'll put the codes on in here so it makes it a little easier. There we go. So end of the template in this case here is LFPO. So if I say, I know that's where I want to insert, behind the back of the footpath, then I just have to say end of template. If it's before code, then it'll be wherever you nominate. I'll do an example of that one in a sec. So we'll do end of template first. So we go end of template. So then you don't need to worry about the before codes. You can leave it blank. You do need to give the new code a name. It is the same rules as template entry. The naming convention must have an L or an R in front of it for the software to actually accept it. Even though you're telling it left and right at the top, you still need to put the L and the R in the name. Then you need to give it a range. Now, the interesting thing with the range is you can type in the numbers you want if you know them. So if I want to start at 0, that's great. You can use these pickers to pick where you would like to end your, start your, whichever one you want, but be aware that this will always snap to the nearest sampled section. So even though you might think you're snapping at a point in the drawing from using maybe one of the grips, if there's not a sampled section there, the software will go to the nearest one. So be very careful with that. If you want to invent new points, you must use that add extra sections bit that I showed you earlier, sampled sections. Or if you know the change you want to add in, you use the add extra sample points via the add extra sections command, which we'll do in a couple of variations time. But for this example here, I want to get to the end of my alignment. So if I've got my snaps on, it should snap me to the end. It's beautiful. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see what happens. So now I need to give it a width. Now, the nice thing we give you here is that whilst it's an insert command, it actually is kind of like the linear vary command, which Jonathan will show you later on. But it essentially gives me the ability to transition the shape or the section that I'm putting in from the start to the end. So I can actually say the start width of this thing is going to be 1.9 meters, which will match my width at my side road here at road 1. But at the end, I want it to be 0. So essentially, I want it to transition around here, just in a linear fashion. Bear that in mind. Then I need to tell it what type of vertical control I'm after. So I'm going to go for a slope. And my slope in my template is 5%. Do I want to see the thing when I plot? Yes, I do. These ones here are the create stuff, discussed later. These two here, you'll see these in a lot of the variations, if not all of them. And they are all about when a variation at, say, the end of one and the start of the next, if you maybe start and end something at the same point, if the variation actually stacks up and does a double entry against the code you're manipulating, linear vary is a classic if you're using the incremental option, adjust allows you to essentially tell the software to ignore the variation at the beginning and the end so that you don't get the double up. So let me see if I can illustrate. The way the auto template works, it actually is auto inserting things. And if I don't adjust the start, I'm going to get a double entry for that 1.9 meter, and this is actually going to shoot right out. So you'll see in a sec when I do it. See in the drawing down here, the white line shot out. If I refresh the model, look at the cross-section view, the model viewer view, you'll see that the model here at the beginning goes absolutely pear-shaped. And that's because there's a double entry at the 0 point. So all I do is say, I want to ignore the 0 in this variation, update it, refresh everything, and the model ignores that first value at 0 and then does it from then onwards and cleans it right up for me. And now I've got my transition going around so that at least I've got something to model what's happening with my insert. All right, so that is insert at the end of a template. If I want to insert at a midpoint in a template or inside a template, then I'm going to do this in a different location on a different model. So I'm going to do this on this model over here, which is Princess Highway. So I better zoom this thing out. Somewhere around here will do. So what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to insert a section in between. I can get this up. Here we go. Cross section. So I want to insert a section in between here. I want to put a shoulder piece in. I could very legitimately do it in my template, but I just want to show you how it happened, what happens in here. I also can launch the data view, sorry, the data form from here. So it's another way to get it up. This variation here, there are some variations already in here, and I have used the comment entry. Now, Jonathan did make the comment, pun intended, that I'm a massive advocate for the comments, and I have learnt this in my professional career, that if you don't put all the comments in your modeling, it's not into the world, because you know what you're doing at the time you're doing it. But when you come back to look at your project in perhaps, I don't know, 4 or 5 months time, when it's actually in construction and you got to work out what's happened, you're never going to remember. So the comments are an invaluable tool for you to remind yourself when you look back at your data, or if maybe a colleague needs to look at your data to see what happens, to actually understand what it is you've actually done with the variations in particular. So the comment field is just literally this one here, and it is just a text entry. So in here, I've already written in what I wanted. So in here, it's just that. And then it just reminds me, it's not something that the software will use in any way, shape, and form other than just a note in the list.
Just a quick point on that, Todd.
Yes.
For those of you that have used our tech support or help desk, it's also really helpful for us, because when we receive your data, and we do receive 50 different variations, and you're saying, oh, I've got a problem with one of them, just bear in mind that the comments aren't just necessarily for you, they benefit us as well, because they're a really helpful marker. So that's all I wanted to say.
Very good point, Jonathan. Very good point. So anyway, so all of my ones here, I have put them in. I would normally do it, but to save a bit of time to make sure we can cover all the variations in our session, I'm not going to do it for this particular exercise, but I would advocate that you actually do it. The other thing you would certainly use is the copy command. So once you've entered one comment, you're doing something that's similar, just literally copy it, resort it to the position you want, change the text, and you're done. But anyway, so this example here, I want to insert a section again. So I'm going to go insert. I'm going to leave it jump to the end because that's where I want to put it. The section I want to make a manipulation on this time is the right-hand side. So over here, I want to then do it before a certain code. So be very careful of the wording here, before selected code. So you've got to nominate the code that you want the thing to go in before. And remember, direction in terms of our templates is always centerline out. So if you're on the left, it's centerline, moving to the left, positive or negative, I guess. And on the right, it is away from the center line. So it's always away from the center line is effectively the outward direction. Just be careful with that, because it can catch you out, because there are some variations where we actually say before or we say after. So you've got to read the question. So the code I want to insert before, in this case here, is the RFPI, which is this code here. I want to put something in before this, which means it'll go after the right edge of bitumen, because I want to model a new piece of shoulder. I'm going to call it RSH for right shoulder. Once again, make sure you put the R or the L in for the left and the right. The range, I'm just going to go for the full length. So I'm going to put massive numbers in for that. Start width, I want to be meter wide, and I'm going to do a slope, a slope of 2%. Just to be clear, vertical is just a height difference. So plus for up, minus for down. And I want to see the plot, so I'll update that. So my cross section here suddenly changes. There's now a right shoulder in it. And amazingly, the subgrade worked. I will explain why that worked in a sec. To see what happened over here in the model, if I refresh the models, you'll see a whole new element go into my cross section. So there'll now be a shoulder piece sitting in there. So everything shifts out. So when you use insert, you're essentially adding a new section, which therefore, if all the other sections are just stacked behind it, it's kind of like a stack of cards, they all push out. The reason the subgrade worked here, the template that is actually being applied to this cross section, already had what we call the code pairs in it. So when it comes down to templates, we do the subgrade based on what we call a code pair. So a code pair is adjacent codes, one way or the other. So in example up here, the center line to the right edge of bitumen is one code pair. Right footpath inner to right footpath outer is another code pair. Well, the code pair that I effectively created by adding in the right shoulder is REB to RSH. Whilst it doesn't appear here, you can actually use these two commands here, set subgrade by codes or edit subgrade, to edit one you've already made or add a whole new one in by entering the codes. A word of advice, if you want to enter in the center line, it is literal, basically based on the code shown here in the cross section, which is C.L. Don't put CL, it's not the code. The software recognizes the center line as C.L. when it comes to the code pairs. You don't have to be order specific here, it doesn't matter, it's just looking for the adjacent pair match. Because the code already existed in my template, it just suddenly appeared when I inserted the code, which is one of the nice things about insert, because if you didn't do it for the full length, then that subgrade would only appear for the region I potentially specified. And the code pair I was using is this one here, REB to RSH, which is my layer of asphalt followed by my layer of infill. So you can have the code pairs matching in your template before you make the variations, or you can make the variation and add in code pair afterwards. If I make a change to one of these things, maybe I'll make this a bit deeper for some reason. If I apply that out, the cross-section adjusted. So it's live to each other. It doesn't matter which order you do it in, but that's why the subgrade worked for my example here. All right, so that is insert before a code. So the next one I want to show you is insert with what we call interpolated levels. So I'll jump to another part of my model for this. So this time I'm going to have a look at Eyelet Street here. In my model view, we're looking at, where are we looking at? The pond, over here, somewhere around here, this will do. And I better get a cross section up. Cross section and data form. Okay, so again, there's already some variations sitting in here that I have done previously just to control the widths of this cross section. But the first cross section I want to put in is actually to control what happens with the pavement on the right hand side. So the brief I've been given, which is different to the brief Jonathan's been given for the same road that he's going to show you later, is that the right hand side of this road, the curb needs to be replaced. So the current curb is barrier curb, but we need to put in some rollover. But I don't really want to rebuild the entire pavement stretch. I just want to rebuild a bit of the pavement in front so that I can get the curb machine in to build the curb. The rest of it, I potentially just want to resheet or just add a new veneer of wearing course over the top. So the insert section with interpolated levels is a really nice way to essentially add in a code into your cross section that is effectively just for subgrade changes, because it won't change the crossfall between the center line and the right edge of bitumen. It just adds it in and uses the same crossfall for both sections. But it gives me a code to allow me to apply different code pairs for different subgrade conditions, which is exactly what I want to do in this particular case. So we go in, add a new entry. This time we are looking for insert section with interpolated levels. And the range I want to do this thing for, again, is the whole length. So I'm just going to use 0 to 1,000. Same as the other one where you have the idea of before and after. Not quite, sorry, this one's after code, whereas the other one was at the end of template, but the same concept. It's direction specific from the center line working out. So in my case here, I'm going to go, I want to go before, and I'm going to do this on the right. So I want to do this before the right edge of bitumen. And the new code I want to put in is a code called RSOR. And then in terms of the method of definition of it, you have three options. You have relative to code, which is the code that you are nominating here. So in this case, the right edge of bitumen. Fixed distance, which is actually a fixed distance from the center line. So be careful with that one because it's fixed direction left and right. So negative for the left, positive for the right. And the user alignment is giving you the full control where you want full independent varying control where you've defined your own alignment to control the position of this. Good for reconstruction projects where you may be extending pavement, but the saw cut line's not consistent because you've got patches of maybe substandard pavement that you want to cut out. So you draw an alignment to map out the edge that you actually want to cut along. User alignment is the way to do it. For the example I'm going to do, I'm going to go relative to code. The offset I want is actually negative 0.6, which means it's going to actually come in 0.6 back towards the center line. No alignment needed, so I don't need to worry about it. Click on apply. And there's my new saw cut code. If I refresh my model, which is what this button is, every time you make a change and you need to update models, you can use this one to refresh everything. And the software will rebuild total model. And if model viewer is open, regenerate the model viewer. And you'll see that the pavement makeup in the model view up here has actually changed color because I've got it set to go up for a different color. And in my section here, I've got full depth pavement for this small section, and then I've only got a different pavement here. Exact same technique as the template subgrade that I showed you on the Princess Highway one, where I actually already had the code pairs of the centerline RSAW to REB sitting in the section to do my pavement switch. Exactly the same. So that's insert with
Todd,
interpolated levels. Yes.
Whilst you're on that one, can
Yes.
we just had a quick question come in about inserting after the center line. Can you just show the example and just by fudging that, I say fudging it, just showing the alternatives, what happens with the center line method. So this was fixed distance. So instead of relative to code, yeah, so go fixed distance and then just, we just want to show what happens with this, how it
Okay, so if I go
adjusts.
1 meter, so add that. So it's 1 meter from the center line to here.
Yep.
If I go -1,
Nothing.
good. It does take it out. Beautiful. Okay,
Yep.
so I was wrong on my statement there, and you can take that out in the webcast recording.
We'll do. I'll get it out in post editing. Great.
Okay, because I think previously it used to actually treat the negatives and positives as left and right. So good to see that it ignores that.
Yes.
Beautiful. So
hopefully that answers the question which came through. If the person that asked that could just let us yes or no, that would be great. Thank you. Cheers, Todd.
No worries. I'll flip this back to what I had. Cool. All right. Next one, I think that's enough for that one because that's pretty straightforward. Great for reconstruction projects, as I said, used to use it all the time. Next one I want to do is actually a very similar technique in terms of inserting a code into a cross section, but in this case here, it's actually going to be on the other side. I'm going to do it on the left. In terms of what I'm going to do, I'm going to, hang on, let me just reposition. What change am I at? About 320. All right. So let's go and look at 320. All right, model-wise, I think I'm just up here just for clarity. Same concept. The left side of this road is brand new curb and channel. There is no existing curb and channel to replace. It's the same deal with the pavement in here. The bulk of it's pretty good. Someone's made that assessment. So this time I want to insert a new code into my section, but I actually want to drape the code onto my surface model in the first place. So this one, if we get into that, would be using, I get the command list up. This is the other insert, because there are 3 of them. This is insert a section and match the levels to a surface. So this one is essentially combining 2 other actual variations. So this is the same as just doing a general insert and then using match to surface variation. Kind of rolls the 2 things together. So if that's the type of thing you're trying to achieve, this is the variation you would use. So same as in the last ones, I'm just going to go a full range. When it is any variation that is alignment dependent in terms of offset, it's actually the extent of the alignment that controls it. So if my alignment doesn't exist at change 1000, if my road was that long, it would just stop the moment the alignment that controls the variation stops. So the range is kind of irrelevant because the alignment doesn't exist, variation doesn't happen. So you can actually use the existence of the alignment for the variation to control when the variation actually kicks into your models. If that makes sense, I hope. Okay, so this one's the left side. So amazingly, it's going to be called left saw. Same idea of picking a code, but this time, and this is the one I wanted to stress about, you're inserting after a code. So I actually want to put this before the left edge of bitumen. So it actually means working out from the center line. I want to put it after the center line. So I actually pick the center line I then nominate the surface I want the thing to drape onto. So in my case, it's going to be my NS. And then I need to nominate the alignment I want to control this with. So there is already an alignment sitting in here called the left saw cut for eyelet street. And if I did want to put in any sort of height adjustment, so quite a number of these things, particularly with the ones that drape, actually have height adjustment controls. So you can potentially drape on a model and add 30 mils, 20 mils, 50 mils, whatever it is you want, or go down with the negative. Essentially, I add that in. Exact same rules as what I did with the subgrade on the other one. I have the LSAW as the pavement switch. If I refresh my model, then cross-section up here does the same as what happens on the right, in that there is a new section of pavement. So essentially the dark stuff is brand new pavement. The lighter stuff is my resheety stuff. The advantage of this is the offset control here is controlled by an alignment as opposed to a fixed value in some form. So this is kind of the full control version. To be clear though, I'm not going to go to the effort of this because I think this is something that we've either done before or Jonathan's going to do in his bit with string control. But this cross section here is coming from the template. So this 3% is coming out of my template settings from my template crossfall. The crossfall here, because it is between a matched surface and this is matched on the surface, this is essentially the existing surface crossfall. So if I was doing this properly, I probably would go to the effort of actually modeling this thing with some sort of range and string control to make a change to what happens to that.
Todd?
Yes.
I know I was actually going to cover this, but to be fair, this is the prime example of using match code to
section.
Match section slope to codes. So I'm happy if you actually want to do this particular
Match
one down the bottom of the list. The very bottom. No.
Oops,
The very bottom. Yeah. I'm happy because I think this is probably
Yep.
the best example of showing you how this comes into play. So I'm happy if you want to take
No,
this one.
I'm happy to do it. So if I want to essentially take this crossfall and apply it to this section, then the entry I need to use is match section slope to codes. And it's literally the same concept. Find your range. So I'm just going to go the whole length. I'm going to apply this to my LEB code. I'm going to do the calculation between the center line and the LSAW code. So in other words, here through to here.
I should stress at this point, you can't go the other way. So you can't take the slope in the reverse, and you can't take codes that are from the other side of the template on the wrong side either. So
no, you need to use the full string controls for that.
It's always going from the center line outwards, and that's the direction of your code picking. Yep.
Yes. Thank you. Optional alignment. So if I had an alignment controlling this, I wonder how this is going to mix, given that I've already got left controlled by an alignment. We'll find out. This might bring me undone. We'll see how it happens. I might have to disable this one. And so I lost track of what I was up to. Start grade adjustment, end grade adjustment. So you can actually add grade value. So if you want to do perhaps the existing grade plus 0.5% or less than 0.5% or something like that, you can use these grade adjustments to make some changes to those calculations. But if I just do it raw like this, there we go. It basically takes the cross-section slope from here and projects it to here. So if I scroll through, you'll see, if I go to a section that actually has things, you'll see all the values are kicking across. And because I had the left edge of bitumen up here already controlled by the alignment, I didn't actually need to fill it in here. But if I was being efficient, I probably should just fill it in here and actually remove that control at all, because I'm kind of doubling up. But
I guess
it's always before, you can do lots of different things different ways.
It's the order of calculation at the end of the day, isn't it?
It is.
The one at the bottom is overriding the one above it. So the one at the top is the first variation that happens. Then as they go through,
that's controlling its position, and then the bottom one is not got any option to control the position, so it's using the previous position. So in effect, it's doing the two. But if I want to reduce the clutter in my variation list, then I would probably specify the alignment down here. Maybe it's actually a good example to do this. So if I actually pick the alignment and it's that one, apply that, and then I actually come to this one, kill it. Doesn't actually change anything in the cross section, and then I would actually probably use my resort, push it to the top, just so that it's neat and matches up with my entries here. Then I go with control from alignment, slope from previous, ease section. I will say, whenever you make an edit to a comment, it is just like a variation. You do need to hit the add update button here to refresh the list over here. But there, that's prime example of using comments. And then when I come back and look at this, I'll know what I've done.
Todd, just a quick one.
Yes.
I think it was a slip of the tongue, but you did say very briefly that you could disable a variation, and someone has picked that up on the Q&A. So I should stress there is no disabling of a variation. I
When did I say
presume
that? Okay. Anyway,
yeah, no, you
there
can
is a
hear it back
trick.
in the recording. You did say it, but Cam has picked this up and he's gone, did you say I've been deleting variations? Yes, you are right.
There is a way to disable a variation. It's not a nice way, but there is a way, which is here. You just change the range. You just say this thing starts at 1,000,000 and ends at 1,000,001. And it essentially goes away. But then you've got to reset the change values. So it's
so
up
you've
to
sort
you.
of semi disabled it, yes.
Correct.
Which I think Steve, there's a few people now flagging up going, and Steve's going, set the changes to 0. So yes, that is
change the change
method.
range to something extreme, something 0, something negative, something that's outside the alignment if it's an alignment based one, or something that's outside the range of where you're working. But yeah, so it probably was a slip of the tongue. It's not disabled in terms of I turned a variation off. Be nice, but it doesn't exist. I was more just saying that you can essentially adjust the change range and effectively disables it. There is only one variation that does exist that you can disable temporarily, and that is your string control. And Jonathan will show you that with one of the options. And it's not really disable. It's more like just ignore.
Ignore what I'm telling it to do. Yeah,
pretty much.
Thank you, Todd.
Apologies if I got everyone excited on something that hasn't been put into the software. All right, so that's two for one. All right, next one I want to show you is delete section. So let's jump out of these and we'll go up to my delete section one. Come on. So I'm going to do this on whole new road number 1. Very original name for this. So where am I? I'm near lot 3. Lot 3 here. Okay. So in here, what I want to do in this particular variation, so if I come in here and go to the data form, I want to, okay, didn't get the data form, didn't get close enough to the center line. I want to essentially remove the nature strip. So I want to kill off the green. I want to put the footpath to behind. I want to go American style and have a sidewalk rather than a footpath. So I'm going to use my good old trusty delete section. So delete section allows me to remove a section for a range. So this is what I'm going to show. So timestamp wise, we've got to remember to flag this one as 2 things, Jonathan. I'm going to show how the add extra data changes works. So whenever you put in a change value in here, whatever value you enter, if it doesn't exist, the software will go to the nearest sampled section, next nearest sampled section. Except when you do what I'm about to do now. So if I'm going to go, I want to go from 205, which is not a sampled section in this road, and I want to end my variation at 255. So I want to do 50 meters of footpath removal, and I want to do it to my LFPI. So effectively, that's the actual code that defines the green. But if I nominate that I want to create the change at the start and the end, then I apply the variation. So I hit on the add update, and then I hit on the add data change entry, and then any entries that are coming from a variation that has those things ticked is now part of my selection set from my sampling. So then if I update my model, you'll see that the footpath kicks away. And if I look at a cross section in the same spot, so if I pull up my cross sections, if I go back a section, see how now 205 is in the sections, and if I go forward, 255 is in the sections. Because I use these, you can't just tick them alone. You've got to make sure you click on this button to make sure that it reads those sections. So it's kind of a 2-step process. Unfortunately, it is not a graphical pick. You can't use this to pick a graphical location and then enter that value. If you know the number, type it in. If you want to do the graphical pick concept, then you've got to use the selected sections control here, where you can go and pick a change range or a specific change that you want to add to your sampled list. But they're kind of all the tools in the box for adding extra sampling in. The other thing you'll notice in here, the subgrade's disappeared. So there's no footpath subgrade. So if I go beyond 255 footpath there, that's because the footpath definition is LFPI to LFPO. It doesn't exist anymore. So just to round out that discussion on subgrade, and I know I'm running short, Jonathan, on time, but I really want to show this one because it kind of rounds out that discussion we had. So we are in local road 6, it's actually on the right road. I simply come in here and I go set by codes, and I just type in the codes I want. LBK to LFPO, which is the new codes in the section here. So LBK, LFPO. Add them in.
Just a quick note, I want to flag this because you may already do it, Todd, my apologies, but if you do want to do something between the center line to the LED.
Yeah, I did talk about this earlier.
Sorry, you did. I was answering somebody else's question at the time, probably. So yeah, that's my excuse. C.L. Thank you. Cheers, Todd.
It's very much, I'll reiterate, very much verbatim what is shown on the screen in the template editor. It is C.L. is what we call the centerline code when it comes to subgrade definition. So here you go, 100 mils of concrete. If I did actually want to do this on both sides, if I had potential for doing this on the other side, I tick this and the software invents the code pair opposite, so the L's and the R's. I don't care because I don't need it in this one, but that's what you would do if you were being universal, if you knew you were going to do changes on the right side. Hit apply, click OK. Cross-section now suddenly updates to show me my subgrade. So that's the opposite of what I did before, where I had the code pairs already existing. When they don't exist, I can still add them in afterwards. So it doesn't matter when you do it. All right, next one, delete all. Okay, so this one is the same idea as delete section. So delete section, if you want to delete multiple pieces of a cross section, you would have to copy the entry, clone it, change the code. If you want to just delete everything outside certain codes, so where's the example I'm going to do for this one? I'm going to do this on, oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to do this across Buckland Street. So this actually makes a fair bit of sense. So let me just explain how you would do it if you're using standard delete code. So if I'm looking at this part of the world, my curb and channel is shooting across. I don't want it going across. So I would need to run delete to get rid of the invert, delete to get rid of the top, delete to get rid of the back. So it's 3 deletes. So there is a command in the software in terms of the variations where I can actually use a, sorry, the other thing I'm going to show you here, I must admit I did add some extra sampling, so I might just show it to you. So I increased the sampling range across here, and I did make sure there was some extra sampling really tight to each other so that the variation I apply occurs over a really short transition. So I did use the add extra sections command before I even made this model, knowing in advance, but you can always fix it afterwards, because when you apply variation, the software will do the transition from adding or subtracting to the next section along. So if that section's 10 meters down the road, it'll actually happen a long way away. So if you want it to happen real quick, then you potentially add in 2 sample points that are only maybe 100 mils apart, and then that transition, in terms of the strings running laterally along your string, happens in a real short distance. So you'll see it here in a sec. Last thing, bring up a section. So if I bring up a section here and data form. Okay, so instead of running delete section 3 times, you actually use the delete all sections outside of code. So this one, same deal, you can specify a range. So I'm going to actually pick a range. So I'm going to say I want to go from, I know I want to go from, not that, the snaps were on when I did that. Let me turn my snaps off. I want to go from there. So essentially it's that point right there. And I want to end this at that one. So I want to end it here so that the transition back happens in that little short distance. Now, this gives you the ability to do it on both sides of your cross section. So if you don't want to delete anything at all on one side, you can leave it blank, or you can actually pick the batter entry, which doesn't do anything. It's not a code you can manipulate. I don't want to change anything on the left, so I leave it blank. But on the right, I want to trim everything beyond the right edge of bitumen out. So all of my pieces of my curb, I just want it to go away. So I click on apply, and all those strings disappear in the model. And in the cross section, they've all gone. So when you want to delete multiple things in sequence, delete outside is the way to do it. Refresh the model, and in the 3D model there, you'll see that the curve and channel disappears. So that's delete section and delete all sections. Kind of the same thing. One's just a mass version of the other. Okay. Next one is conditional delete. So this is kind of a bit more fancy. This allows you to delete based on conditions in your model. Oh, sorry, in your cross-section model. So best shown by a illustration. So I'm looking at Princess Highway, and I have applied some super elevation to it. So if I bring up a cross-section, And on the left side of this cross section, I have actually built into the template, so it happens all the way along, a table drain. So it's got one leg that comes down, a leg that creates the bottom, a third leg that creates going back up, fourth leg that creates a bench, and then a batter. Now that's great because that happens if I'm in full cut, does what I want, cuts it all off. But when I'm in fill, which is right in the height of the super elevation, I don't actually want any of this to happen at all. So there's lots of ways you could model this. You could go to the extent of running an intelligence section where you make it programmatic. But conditional delete actually allows me to remove pieces of my section based on conditions of codes. The best way, as I said, is to show you this is by example. So the first condition I want to try, and I've got to remember to find, there it is, conditional delete. Same arrangement, you pick your range. I'm going to go 0 to 1,000 for the whole job. So you've got to pick this idea of a trigger code, and it has to exist. Now, our help system documents all of these variations, so I would strongly encourage you, if you need to read up on how these things work and what all the entries do, that's your port of call. And it discusses in the help system that trigger code must exist on the cross section for the conditional delete to apply. And it must be outside the range of things being deleted, and is strongly, and I emphasize the strongly recommended, to be basically the last code before the batter, which is what I'm going to use here, which in this case is my LTD4. And then I'm going to say if my edge of bitumen, so left edge of bitumen here, has the condition of fill greater than 0.33, which is, I did calculate this as the depth of my pavement, I want to remove pieces. Now, you can actually have up to 2 conditions, and you can control how those conditions are applied. So you can either leave it blank or say no second control, or you can say there and, so it's logic, so it means both conditions are going to be met for the delete to occur, or it's a or, which means either condition can be met and the delete will occur. If you don't have anything second, you don't need to fill it in, but you can actually have 2 sets of rules if you want to. And then these are the rules for the second code, so I don't need to worry about those. Delete code. So the first part that I want to kill is actually my entire table drain. I want to kill all the way out to the LTD4. I add that in, and in there, my batter takes over, and the table drain just completely disappears. And if I update my model, you'll see up here, I might zoom out a bit so you can see what happens. So you can see there in the cross section here, it's gone. In the model, it's gone. Now that's great. So it's given me a few patches where it's disappeared, but not so flash when I get to, say, a section like this, where I may want to have, where's a good one? Should have written down the chain edge. Perhaps this one here. I actually want the table drain to kick in, but I don't want the bench to happen. So what I actually do is put in a second version of it. So it goes 0 to 1,000, and this time the trigger is still my LTD4. Delete if LTD4, so in other words, if this code here is in fill at all, so from 0. And I only want to kill off the last 2 pieces, so I want to get rid of the bench. So I get rid of 3 and 4, so basically we'll take out this section and this section. So in other words, the batter here, 1 and 2, same batter, will kick in. So add that one in, and then it wipes out the bench. And then if I rebuild my model, and I'll make it big screen so you can see what happens. So benching when it's needed, no benching when it's not needed. So you can use conditional delete to do semi-intelligent assessments of things in your cross-section. All right, last one, and then I'm going to pass you over to Jonathan. So this one is copy codes. So what I've actually already got set up in my model is a string sitting over here. So this alignment here to model the footpath. And this is to line up with some of Jonathan's comments earlier about a webcast we've done previously, where we actually went in, showed you different techniques on how to model these indented parking facilities. Let's assume that they are going to happen in the future. Maybe the developer of this particular commercial facility has been compelled to do that. But the footpath is being pushed out and around though where they're going to happen in advance, so that we can not have to rebuild footpath when we come to build the indented bays. So I have already modeled the string that represents the footpath. So let me just turn it on to give you guys some context. So it's this one here. Now, if I use just my alignment control to push the cross-section footpath in the model template for Islet Street to follow this alignment that I've got for the string, it'll work great in a few spots, but the level control is limited to whatever I do in the horizontal alignment control, whether it's a maintain the level or maintain the slope. That's the only options you get. When you want to do full string control, that's when you jump into strings. But to merge the two things together again, you actually use the copy codes. It allows you to merge one model into another. You tend to use it all the time for this type of stuff. The other thing that it really, really helps you with, and I just emphasize this one, and I will illustrate, when you actually look at a cross-section through here, so I'll bring it up on the screen right now, here. If I get the strings up, here we go. This cross-section, that one, Princess Street. And if to give it context, I'm actually going to go in and show you the pieces. So we're looking, let's do it on all string level from Islet Street footpath and alignment, Islet Street footpath. So the blue line is the alignment position. The red dot is the level from the string. So I have already graded, as I said, the string for the footpath over here. So just to show you what I actually did with that one, just so you can see that there is a design for it. It's just a string, setting some levels. I actually did use some design constraints to model the thing. So I basically did a calculation from when it wakes up. Here we go. From the back of curb, I projected back some grades here to give me some guidance on what to set the footpath to. And then I've set the footpath and I've applied a template in the footpath itself. So it's just a center line and a left footpath outer. Set the levels, I'm happy with it. That's what this string model is that I'm showing in the model view here. But I want this footpath to follow that one. So that's where I use copy code. So from a data entry perspective, it is, oops, that's a template entry. It is this one here, copy codes, looking okay. I tell it the range. So the other thing is beautiful about this, it only applies where the string exists, so I can use the full length, doesn't matter. I pick the thing I want to suck information from. So this is the string I'm taking information from. So it's Islet Street footpath method. I want to use full positions. I want to take full control of codes I nominate and push them across to pieces inside Islet footpath. And then I say in my current model, which is the road, I want the inner footpath on the left to follow the center line of the string from Islet footpath, and then I want the LFPO to follow the LFPO. So I normally work these things so the strings all run in the same direction, and I use the same codes for the same things I want to match. So that'll make it easier. Basically, it's LFPO to LFPO, LFPI to the center line, which is my control piece. And when I apply that, the software repositions this code, but this code as well. So that means the crossfall here is completely and utterly controlled by the string, which makes sense because if I'm looking at a section, where am I? I'm here. So the slice through this model is not my standard 2.5% or 2% or whatever the crossfall is on my footpath from my template. If I use just alignment control to control the inner to that point, then this position over here is 2.5 meters or 1.5 meters or whatever it is this way at 2%, which is not what happens in reality. The footpath's got it slow. You're slicing it at a non-perpendicular nature. And copy codes allows me to mimic that. If I actually undo part of that, I take out the LFPO and apply that, See how it jumps back, position shifts here, and the cross-four goes back to the template. So hopefully that illustrates why copy codes is actually really useful for merging things together. So if you actually wanted to plot a cross-section with that footpath piece modeled based off the string, copy codes is actually the way you do it. So you go LFPO to LFPO, restore that, and then when you plot a cross-section, this thing here is fully controlled by the string. So if you make changes to this, this just updates, all stays together.